the discovery, Doctor. Sarah Chen pressed her face against the cold metal of the observation deck, staring at the massive structure floating in space. After 3 months of travel to the edge of the Andromeda sector, what they found was impossible. "This can't be real," whispered her research partner, Dr. Marcus Webb. "The scans show this thing is over 50,000 years old. The structure was beautiful and terrifying at the same time. It stretched for miles in every direction, made of a dark metal that seemed to absorb light itself. Strange symbols covered its surface, glowing with a soft blue light that pulsed like a heartbeat." Sarah had spent her entire career studying ancient civilizations, but nothing had prepared her for this. The structure was clearly artificial, but it was older than any known civilization in the galaxy. Much older. "Captain Rodriguez needs to see this," Sarah said, her voice shaking with excitement. "This changes everything we know about galactic history." As they made their way to the bridge, Sarah's mind raced with possibilities. Who could have built something this massive? And more importantly, where were they now? Captain Rodriguez was a tough woman who had seen her share of strange things in deep space. But even she looked stunned as she studied the readings. "Our sensors are picking up some kind of energy signature from inside," she said. "It's faint, but it's definitely artificial. Something is still active in there after all this time." Sarah felt her heart skip a beat. "Active? You mean something is still alive in there?" "I don't know what it means," the captain replied. "But I know we need to investigate. This could be the most important discovery in human history." The next few hours were spent preparing for the expedition. Sarah and her team would enter the structure through what appeared to be a docking bay. The bay was enormous, easily large enough to fit a dozen ships the size of theirs. As their shuttle approached the alien structure, Sarah noticed something that made her stomach turn. The docking bay wasn't empty. Dozens of ships filled the space, but they weren't like anything she had ever seen. They were sleek and organic looking, as if they had been grown rather than built. "Those ships," Marcus said quietly. "They don't look human." Sarah nodded, unable to speak. As they got closer, she could see that the ships were covered in the same strange symbols as the main structure. But there was something else. Something that made her blood run cold. Many of the ships were damaged, burned, as if they had been attacked. "Captain," Sarah called over the comm, "I think we need to be very careful. This might not be an abandoned structure. It might be a tomb." Their shuttle touched down in the docking bay with a soft thud. The artificial gravity was still working, which meant the structure still had power after 50,000 years. That was impossible with any technology Sarah knew about. As they stepped out of the shuttle, their lights illuminated the massive space around them. The ceiling disappeared into darkness above them, and the walls were covered in more of the glowing symbols. But it was the silence that bothered Sarah the most. In a structure this large, there should be some sound, the hum of machinery, the whisper of air recyclers, something. Instead, there was nothing but their own footsteps echoing in the darkness. "Over here," called Dr. James Park, their linguist. "I think I found something." They gathered around what appeared to be a control panel. The symbols on it were different from the others they had seen. These seemed to pulse faster, as if responding to their presence. "Can you read any of it?" Sarah asked. James shook his head. "I've never seen anything like this. But look at this." He pointed to a series of symbols that seemed to be arranged in groups. "This might be some kind of numbering system. And if I'm right, this number here is massive. Bigger than any population count for a single planet." Sarah studied the symbols, trying to make sense of them. What if it's not a population count? What if it's a casualty count? The thought sent a chill through the entire team. If this was a record of deaths, then whatever had happened here was genocide on a scale that was hard to imagine. "We need to go deeper," Sarah said. "There has to be more information somewhere in this structure." As they moved away from the docking bay, their lights revealed corridors that stretched into darkness. The walls were covered in artwork that was both beautiful and disturbing. Strange creatures with multiple eyes and flowing appendages were shown in what appeared to be scenes of daily life. But as they moved deeper into the structure, the artwork began to change. The peaceful scenes were replaced by images of war. The strange creatures were shown fighting against something else, something that looked disturbingly familiar. "Sarah," Marcus said, his voice tight with concern. "Look at this." He was pointing at a large mural on the wall. It showed the strange creatures fleeing from humanoid figures. The humanoids were smaller than the aliens, but they carried weapons that seemed to be incredibly destructive. The humanoids looked exactly like humans. "This can't be right," Sarah whispered. "Humans weren't even spacefaring 50,000 years ago. We were still living in caves." But the evidence was right in front of them. The mural clearly showed humans as the aggressors in some ancient war. A war that, based on the empty corridors around them, the humans had won. As they continued deeper into the structure, they found more murals, more evidence of this ancient conflict. The story they told was becoming clearer and more disturbing with each step. The alien race, whoever they were, had been incredibly advanced. They had built cities that floated in space, ships that could travel between galaxies, and weapons that could destroy entire star systems. They had been the masters of the galaxy for thousands of years until humans arrived and destroyed them all. The archives. The team spent the next day mapping the structure and documenting everything they found. What they discovered challenged everything they thought they knew about human history. The structure wasn't just a space station. It was an archive, the largest library in the galaxy, built to preserve the knowledge and culture of the race that had called themselves the Architects. Dr. Park had been working on translating the alien language, and he was starting to make progress. What he learned made everyone on the team uncomfortable. "According to these records," he said during their morning briefing, "the Architects were the first species to achieve faster-than-light travel. They explored the galaxy for over 30,000 years, spreading knowledge and helping primitive species develop." Sarah looked at the data Park had compiled. They were explorers, not conquerors. "More than that," Park continued. "They were teachers. Look at this." He activated a holographic display that showed a map of the galaxy. Hundreds of star systems were marked with symbols. Each of these markers represents a species the Architects helped advance from primitive to spacefaring civilizations. They shared their technology, their knowledge, their culture. They were trying to create a galactic community. Marcus frowned as he studied the map. "But then what happened? Why did they disappear?" Park's expression grew dark. "That's where the records get disturbing. About 50,000 years ago, they encountered a new species on the edge of the galaxy. A species they had never seen before. Humans," Sarah said quietly. "The first contact was peaceful," Park continued. "The Architects tried to do what they had always done. They offered to share their knowledge to help humanity join the galactic community. But humans refused? Worse than that. The humans studied the Architects' technology, learned everything they could, and then declared war on them." The silence in the room was deafening. Sarah felt sick to her stomach. "That doesn't make sense. Why would we do that?" Park activated another display. This one showed what appeared to be battle reports. According to these records, humans saw the Architects as a threat. The human leaders believed that any species that advanced would eventually try to conquer humanity. "So they struck first," Marcus said, "and they were incredibly effective at it. The Architects had never fought a war before. They were explorers and teachers, not soldiers. They had no idea how to fight against a species that was dedicated entirely to destruction." Sarah stood and walked to the large window that looked out into space. In the distance, she could see the remains of the alien ships in the docking bay. Ships that had fled here carrying the last survivors of their race. "How many died?" she asked quietly. Park consulted his notes. The records indicate that the Architect population was approximately 12 billion spread across 3,000 worlds. Within 20 years of first contact with humans, that number was 0. 12 billion, Sarah repeated. She turned back to the team. "We committed genocide against an entire species. A species that only wanted to help us." "It gets worse," Park said. "The Architects weren't the only ones. The humans didn't stop with them. Over the next 10,000 years, they systematically eliminated every advanced species in the galaxy." He activated another display. This one showed a timeline of extinctions, species after species all wiped out by human expansion. By the time our recorded history begins, Park continued, humans had already erased every trace of every advanced civilization that had ever existed. We made ourselves the first and only spacefaring species in the galaxy. Sarah felt her legs grow weak. She sat down heavily in her chair. That's why we never found any evidence of alien civilizations. Not because they never existed, but because we destroyed them all. The architects were the last, Park said. They had retreated to this archive, hoping to preserve at least some record of what had been lost. But the humans found them even here. Marcus looked around the empty corridors visible through the briefing room windows. But if the humans found them, why is this place still intact? Why didn't they destroy it like everything else? Park's face went pale. Because they didn't need to destroy it. They did something much worse. He activated one final display. This one showed the interior of the archive, but not as it was now. In the hologram, the corridors were full of architects. Thousands of them, going about their daily tasks, maintaining the knowledge of their extinct race. This was a quarantine, Park said quietly. The humans didn't kill the last architects. They trapped them. They sealed this structure and left them here to die slowly, surrounded by everything they had lost. Sarah stared at the hologram in horror. They were prisoners in their own archive. The records show they survived for over 200 years after the humans sealed them in. 200 years of knowing they were the last of their kind, watching their people die one by one, until finally, the archive fell silent. The weight of what they had discovered was crushing. Sarah had spent her career studying ancient civilizations, hoping to understand humanity's place in the galaxy. Now she knew, and the truth was more horrible than she could have imagined. "We have to tell people," she said finally. "The world needs to know what we did." Marcus shook his head. "Who would believe us? And even if they did, what would be the point? It happened 50,000 years ago. Everyone involved is long dead." "But the truth matters," Sarah insisted. "These people, the architects, they deserve to be remembered. Their story deserves to be told." Park looked uncertain. "The governments of Earth won't want this information made public. It would cause panic, maybe even civil war. People would lose faith in humanity itself." Sarah stood up and walked back to the window. Outside, the remains of the architect ships waited in silent testimony to a crime so vast that it had been erased from history itself. "Maybe losing faith in ourselves is exactly what we need," she said. As she spoke, something caught her eye. One of the alien ships in the docking bay was different from the others. While the rest were clearly damaged and dead, this one still had lights. Faint lights, but lights nonetheless. "Park," she said, her voice tight with excitement. "Your translation work. Are you sure the records say all the architects died?" "Well, the records end about 47,000 years ago, but the implication is clear." "But there's no specific record of the last death?" Park looked confused. "No, but Sarah, it's been 50,000 years. Even if someone survived the siege, they would have died of old age long ago." Sarah pointed to the ship with lights. "Then explain that." "The last Guardian. The ship was smaller than the others, and it was clear that it had been carefully maintained. While the other vessels showed signs of age and neglect, this one looked almost new. Sarah's team approached it carefully. After everything they had learned about humanity's dark past, they weren't sure what they might find inside. The ship's entrance opened as they approached, as if it had been waiting for them. Inside, the corridors were dimly lit but clean. Someone had been taking care of this ship for a very long time. "Hello," came a voice from ahead of them. It spoke in perfect English. The team froze. After 3 days in the silent archive, hearing any voice was shocking. Hearing one that spoke their language was impossible. They moved forward carefully until they reached what appeared to be the ship's main chamber. There, sitting in a chair that seemed to be grown from the same organic material as the ship itself, was an architect. It was beautiful and alien at the same time. Tall and slender, with pale blue skin that seemed to glow softly in the dim light. Its face was humanoid, but elongated, with large eyes that held an intelligence that was clearly ancient. "You are humans," it said. It wasn't a question, Sarah found her voice first. "You're alive. After all this time, you're still alive." The architect smiled, and the expression was both sad and kind. "I am the last. I have been waiting for you to return." "Waiting for us?" Marcus asked. "Why?" The architect stood up slowly. It was clear that despite its alien nature, it was very old. "Because I knew you would. Humans are curious by nature. Eventually, you would find this place and learn the truth about what your ancestors did." Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. "You know what they did to your people?" "I was there," the architect replied. "I watched it happen. I watched as your kind destroyed everything we had built, everyone we loved." The weight of that statement hit Sarah like a physical blow. This creature had witnessed the extinction of its entire species. It had lived with that knowledge for 50,000 years. "I'm sorry," she said, and she meant it with every fiber of her being. "I'm so sorry for what we did to you." The architect tilted its head, studying her. "Are you, or are you simply sorry that you learned about it?" The question was fair and cut deep. Sarah thought about it before answering. "I'm sorry it happened. I'm sorry my species committed genocide. I'm sorry you've been alone for so long." "And what will you do with this sorrow?" the architect asked. Sarah looked at her team. They all looked as shaken as she felt. "I don't know. Tell people, I suppose. Make sure the truth is known." The architect moved to a wall panel and touched it. The chamber filled with holographic displays showing scenes from the war. Humans attacking architect cities, ships fleeing through space, entire worlds burning. "Do you think your people will care?" the architect asked. "Will they change because they learn they are descended from genocidal conquerors?" Sarah wanted to say yes, but she wasn't sure. Humans had a talent for justifying their actions, for explaining away their crimes. "Some will," she said finally. "Maybe not all, but some." The architect nodded slowly. "That is what I hoped you would say." It moved to another panel and the displays changed. Now they showed something different. Humans working alongside other species, ships exploring the galaxy together, cities where multiple races lived in harmony. "This is what we wanted," the architect said. "This is what we tried to build with your ancestors." "It's beautiful," Sarah whispered. "It still could be," the architect replied. "That is why I waited. That is why I preserved everything." Sarah didn't understand. "Preserved everything?" The architect smiled again, and this time there was hope in its expression. "Did you think this archive only contained the history of the architects? It contains the collected knowledge of every species your ancestors destroyed. Their science, their art, their philosophy, their dreams." The implications hit Sarah like lightning. "Everything? You saved everything?" "Everything I could. For 50,000 years, I have maintained this archive, waiting for the day when humans would be ready to learn from their victims instead of simply conquering them." Marcus stepped forward. "What do you mean, ready?" The architect gestured to the displays still showing the peaceful scenes. "Your ancestors destroyed us because they feared us. They feared that we would conquer them, enslave them, destroy their way of life. They could not imagine that an advanced species might want to help rather than harm." "And now?" Sarah asked. "Now you travel the galaxy seeking knowledge rather than conquest. You explore rather than exploit. You ask questions rather than shoot first. You have evolved beyond what your ancestors were." The architect moved to a central console in the chamber. "I have watched human broadcasts for centuries. I have seen your art, your literature, your philosophy develop. I have watched you struggle with questions of right and wrong, seen you try to better yourselves." "You've been watching us?" "Of course. How else would I know if you were ready?" The architect touched the console and the entire chamber came alive with light. "The knowledge of 100 civilizations is stored here. Science that could advance your technology by thousands of years. Art that could inspire your greatest creators. Philosophy that could help you understand your place in the universe." Sarah felt overwhelmed. "You would share all of that with us? After what we did to you?" The architect looked at her with those ancient, wise eyes. "What is the alternative? Should I let all of this knowledge die with me? Should I allow the crimes of your ancestors to rob the universe of everything beautiful that these civilizations created? But how can you forgive us?" "I do not forgive," the architect said simply. "Forgiveness is for the guilty to seek from their victims, and your ancestors are long dead. But neither do I punish the innocent for the crimes of the guilty." It moved closer to Sarah. You did not destroy my people. You were not even alive when it happened. You are not responsible for their crimes, but you could be responsible for their redemption. Sarah felt tears in her eyes. How? Take this knowledge back to your people, not as a gift, but as a responsibility. Use it to build the galaxy we dreamed of. Use it to ensure that what happened to us never happens to anyone else. The architect returned to the console. But know this. If you take this knowledge and use it as your ancestors did, if you use it to conquer and destroy rather than explore and create, then you will have learned nothing from our deaths. Sarah looked around the chamber at the incredible displays of knowledge and culture. It represented the life work of entire civilizations. The responsibility was staggering. How do we know we're worthy of this? She asked. The architect smiled one more time. Because you asked that question. Because you care whether you are worthy. Because you see this as a responsibility rather than a prize. It touched the console again, and a data storage device materialized. Everything is here. Take it. Share it. Use it wisely. Sarah reached for the device, then stopped. What about you? You could come with us. You could see the galaxy again. The architect shook its head. My place is here. I am the guardian of this archive, the keeper of these memories. As long as I live, the knowledge of what was lost will be preserved. But you'll be alone again. I have been alone for 50,000 years, the architect replied. But for the first time in all those millennia, I will not be alone without hope. Sarah took the device. It was warm to the touch and seemed to pulse with its own energy. I promise we'll use this knowledge well. I promise we'll honor the memory of all the civilizations we destroyed. Do not promise me, the architect said. Promise them. It gestured to the walls around them, where the holographic displays still showed scenes of the lost civilizations. Artists creating beautiful works, scientists making discoveries, philosophers pondering the great questions of existence. Promise them that their deaths will have meaning. Promise them that their knowledge will be used to create rather than destroy. Promise them that the galaxy they dreamed of will finally exist. Sarah looked at the faces in the displays. Dozens of different species, all long dead, all victims of human fear and aggression. I promise, she said. The architect nodded. Then my vigil is complete. The weight of truth. The journey back to Earth took 3 months, but for Sarah every day felt like a year. The data device the architect had given her contained more information than humanity had accumulated in its entire history. Science that could solve every energy crisis, medicine that could cure every disease, philosophy that could answer questions humans had been asking for millennia. But with that knowledge came a terrible responsibility. Captain Rodriguez had been unusually quiet during the return journey. After what they had discovered at the archive, everyone on the crew was struggling to process the truth about humanity's past. What are you going to do when we get back? She asked Sarah one evening as they sat in the ship's observation lounge. Sarah had been asking herself the same question every day since they left the archive. I don't know. Part of me wants to release everything immediately. Let the whole world know what we found. And the other part? The other part is terrified of what that knowledge might do. We're talking about technology that could destroy entire star systems, Captain. In the wrong hands, it could make the crimes of our ancestors look like a minor disagreement. Captain Rodriguez nodded. I've been thinking about that too. The governments back on Earth are going to want this technology. They're going to want to use it. To conquer, Sarah said bitterly, just like our ancestors did. Maybe. Or maybe we've learned from their mistakes. Sarah wished she could share the captain's optimism, but she had studied human history too long to have much faith in humanity's ability to learn from its mistakes. The architect said we had evolved beyond what our ancestors were, but have we really? We still have wars. We still have poverty and hunger and injustice. We still solve problems with violence more often than not. Dr. Park joined them at the window. He had spent the entire journey trying to catalog the contents of the data device, and the strain was showing on his face. I've been thinking about what the architect said, he told them. About how our ancestors destroyed the other civilizations because they feared them. What about it? Sarah asked. Well, what if we're doing the same thing now? What if we're so afraid of repeating our ancestors' mistakes that we don't use this knowledge at all? Sarah frowned. What do you mean? Think about it. The architect waited 50,000 years to give us this knowledge. It believed we were ready for it. But we're sitting here talking about hiding it away because we're afraid of what might happen if people learn the truth. Captain Rodriguez leaned forward. You're saying we should release everything? I'm saying maybe the architect was right about us evolving. Maybe we need to have faith that we can do better than our ancestors. Sarah stood and walked to the window, looking out at the stars. Somewhere out there was Earth and 7 billion people who had no idea that their ancestors had committed genocide on a galactic scale. In a few days, she would have to decide what to do with that knowledge. The architect said forgiveness wasn't ours to give or receive, she said finally. But maybe redemption is. When they arrived at Earth, Sarah was surprised to find that news of their discovery had already leaked. The scientific community was buzzing with rumors about an ancient alien civilization and recovered technology. The World Council requested an immediate briefing, and Sarah found herself standing in front of the most powerful people on Earth, trying to explain what they had found. Let me understand this correctly, said Council President Williams. You're telling us that 50,000 years ago, humanity systematically exterminated every advanced species in the galaxy? That's correct, Sarah replied. And this architect, this survivor, it gave you access to all of their accumulated knowledge? Yes. President Williams exchanged glances with the other council members. And where is this knowledge now? Sarah held up the data device. Here. The room erupted in excited whispers. Sarah could see the hunger in their eyes, the desire to possess the advanced technology the device contained. Dr. Chen, said Council Member Zhang, you have in your hands technology that could revolutionize human civilization. Energy sources that could power our cities for millennia, medical advances that could extend human life indefinitely, weapons that could protect us from any threat. Weapons, Sarah repeated. That's what you're most interested in, isn't it? How to turn this knowledge into weapons. We have to consider all possibilities, President Williams said defensively. This technology could be invaluable for defending Earth. Defending against what? Sarah asked. There are no other advanced species in the galaxy. We killed them all, remember? The silence in the room was uncomfortable. Finally, Council Member Petrov spoke up. Dr. Chen, surely you understand that this knowledge cannot be released to the general public. The implications are too significant. You mean you don't want people to know that their ancestors were genocidal monsters? We mean, President Williams said firmly, that this information could cause massive social unrest. People might lose faith in human civilization itself. Sarah looked around the room at these powerful people, and she saw in their faces the same fear and paranoia that must have driven humanity's ancestors to commit genocide 50,000 years ago. The architect was wrong about us, she said quietly. We haven't evolved at all. She turned and walked toward the door. Dr. Chen, where are you going? President Williams called after her. We need that device. Sarah stopped and turned back to face them. No, you don't. You want it, but you don't need it. And based on what I've heard today, you're not ready for it. You can't just walk away with technology that belongs to all humanity. It doesn't belong to humanity, Sarah replied. It belongs to the civilizations we murdered to get it. And I'm going to make sure it's used to honor their memory, not to repeat our crimes. Security guards moved to block her path, but Sarah held up the data device. I wouldn't try to take this by force if I were you. You have no idea what kind of security systems the architects built into it. It was a bluff, but it worked. The guards hesitated, and Sarah walked past them and out of the chamber, but she knew her troubles were just beginning. The choice Sarah had been hiding. For 2 weeks when Dr. Park found her, she had taken refuge in a small research station on Mars, hoping to buy time to figure out what to do with the architect knowledge. But she knew the World Council's security forces would find her eventually. They've been looking everywhere for you, Park said as he entered her temporary laboratory. Half the governments on Earth have declared you a terrorist. For trying to preserve the memory of the civilizations we destroyed, Sarah asked bitterly. for stealing technology that could benefit all of humanity. Park sat down across from her. Sarah, I've been thinking about what you said back on the ship. About redemption. Sarah looked up from the data she had been studying. And? Maybe there's a way to give humanity this knowledge without repeating the mistakes of our ancestors. Sarah shook her head. You heard the council. All they could think about was turning it into weapons. They don't want to learn from our past. They want to profit from it. The council, yes. But what about everyone else? What about the scientists, the philosophers, the artists? What about the people who would use this knowledge to create instead of destroy? Park activated a portable display and showed Sarah news feeds from around the world. Despite the government's attempts to control the story, word of the discovery was spreading. Scientists were calling for the knowledge to be shared openly. Artists were creating works inspired by the little information that had been released about the lost civilizations. Religious leaders were wrestling with the moral implications of humanity's genocidal past. Look at this, Park said, highlighting one news report. Dr. Martinez at the Institute for Galactic Studies has proposed creating a memorial for the extinct civilizations. He wants to build a monument to remember them. One memorial doesn't erase 50,000 years of genocide, Sarah replied. No, but it's a start. Sarah, people are responding to this revelation with sorrow and shame, not pride. They want to do better. Sarah studied the news feeds Park had shown her. He was right that many people seemed genuinely horrified by what they had learned about humanity's past. But she also saw other reactions. Politicians calling for the knowledge to be weaponized for security. Military leaders demanding access to the advanced technology. Corporate executives calculating the profits that could be made from alien science. Some people want to do better, she corrected. Others just want to repeat the same mistakes. Park leaned forward. Then let's give the good people a chance. Release the knowledge openly, make it available to everyone. Don't let the governments control it. Sarah had been considering the same idea, but she was afraid of the consequences. If I release this knowledge publicly, it won't just be scientists and philosophers who get access to it. Every dictator, every terrorist organization, every criminal on Earth will have access to technology that could destroy entire solar systems. And if you don't release it, then the governments will take it by force and use it however they want anyway. At least if it's public, there will be transparency. Before Sarah could respond, alarms started blaring throughout the research station. Red lights flashed and automated warnings filled the air. Security breach. Unauthorized personnel detected. Lockdown initiated. Park looked at Sarah with concern. They found us. Sarah quickly gathered the most important data files and secured the architect device. There's an escape pod in the lower level. If we move fast, the laboratory door exploded inward and armed security forces poured into the room. They were wearing the black uniforms of Earth Defense Force Special Operations. Dr. Chen called the team leader, removing his helmet. I'm Commander Hayes. You're under arrest for theft of alien technology and treason against humanity. Sarah held up the data device. This technology doesn't belong to any government. It belongs to the memory of the species we murdered to get it. That's not your decision to make, Commander Hayes replied. Hand over the device. No. Hayes signaled to his team and they raised their weapons. Dr. Chen, I don't want to hurt you, but I will if necessary. That technology is too important to remain in the hands of one person. Sarah looked at Park, then back at the soldiers. She thought about the architect, still maintaining its lonely vigil at the archive. She thought about the billions of beings who had died because humanity couldn't overcome its fear and paranoia. You're right, she said finally. This technology is too important to remain in the hands of one person. That's why I'm not going to give it to you. Before anyone could react, Sarah activated the data device. But instead of accessing the stored knowledge, she activated its communication systems. Suddenly, every screen in the research station lit up with the same signal, and that signal was being broadcast across every communication channel on Mars, and from there, across the entire solar system. The screen showed the archive chamber where Sarah had met the architect. But now the chamber was different. It was filled with holographic figures, representatives of all the extinct civilizations. their faces solemn but hopeful. And at the center of them all stood the architect. "People of Earth," it said, and its voice was heard simultaneously by billions of humans across the solar system. "I am the last survivor of the race you knew as the architects. 50,000 years ago, your ancestors destroyed my people and every other advanced civilization in the galaxy." Commander Hayes and his team stood frozen, staring at the screens in shock. This was not what any of them had expected. The architect continued, "But I have not contacted you to assign blame or seek revenge. I have waited 50,000 years to offer you a choice." The display changed, showing the vast archive with its countless stores of knowledge and culture. Here is preserved the accumulated wisdom of 100 civilizations. Science that could solve your greatest problems. Art that could inspire your greatest achievements. Philosophy that could guide you to become the species you have the potential to be. The architect looked directly out of the screen, as if it could see each person watching. "But this knowledge comes with a responsibility. It must be used not to conquer, but to create. Not to destroy, but to build. Not to repeat the mistakes of your ancestors, but to redeem them." Commander Hayes found his voice. "Dr. Chen, what have you done?" Sarah smiled. "I've given humanity what the architect gave me. A choice." On the screen, the architect raised its hand, and suddenly every communication device on Earth was receiving a data transmission. The complete archives of the extinct civilizations, available to anyone who wanted to access them. "I offer this knowledge freely," the architect said, "because I believe you have evolved beyond what your ancestors were. I believe you can choose to build rather than destroy, to unite rather than divide, to explore rather than conquer." The transmission showed scenes of what could be, humans working alongside recreated holographic representatives of the extinct species, building cities that floated among the stars, exploring the galaxy as the architects had once dreamed of doing. "But if I am wrong," the architect continued, "if you choose to use this knowledge as your ancestors used their own power, then you will have proven that 50,000 years have taught you nothing, and the universe will be better off without you." The transmission ended, leaving the research station in stunned silence. Commander Hayes lowered his weapon. The entire world just received that transmission. Every government, every scientist, every person with access to a communication device now has the complete architect archives. Sarah nodded. "That's right. No one gets to control this knowledge now. Humanity will have to decide together what to do with it." Park looked at the blank screens with wonder. "It's out of our hands now. The choice belongs to everyone." Over the following days, the world's reaction was everything Sarah had hoped and feared it would be. Some people immediately began working with the alien knowledge, using it to develop clean energy sources and medical treatments that could save millions of lives. Universities around the world opened new departments dedicated to studying the lost civilizations. Not just their technology, but their art, their philosophy, their dreams. But others reacted with fear and greed. Several governments tried to weaponize the alien technology, leading to protests and civil unrest. Corporate interests attempted to claim ownership of various discoveries, sparking legal battles that reached the highest courts on Earth. Most concerning of all, a growing faction of humans rejected the knowledge entirely, claiming it was a trap set by hostile aliens. They called themselves the Pure Earth Movement and demanded that all alien technology be destroyed before it could corrupt human civilization. Sarah watched these developments from the Mars research station, where she had decided to remain despite being cleared of all charges. The World Council had little choice but to drop the case against her once the knowledge became public domain. "Look at this," Park said, showing her the latest news feeds. "The Pure Earth Movement is gaining support. They're saying that accepting alien knowledge proves we're weak, that we should rely only on human innovation." Sarah shook her head sadly. "They're making the same mistake our ancestors made. They're letting fear drive their decisions." On the screen, a Pure Earth spokesperson was giving an interview. "These aliens want to corrupt our pure human nature," the woman said. "They want to make us dependent on their technology so they can control us. We must reject this poison before it destroys everything that makes us human." But there's good news too, Park continued, switching to another feed. This one showed a massive construction project in orbit around Earth. The Memorial Consortium has begun building the Galactic Monument. They're using architect technology to create a living memorial that will tell the story of every extinct civilization. The monument was beautiful beyond words. It appeared to be grown rather than built, with organic curves that seemed to pulse with inner light. Holographic displays would show the history and culture of each lost species, ensuring they would never be forgotten again. Dr. Martinez sent a message, Park added. He wants you to join the memorial project. He says you understand better than anyone what these civilizations meant to the galaxy. Sarah was tempted. The memorial project was exactly the kind of positive use of architect knowledge that she had hoped for. But she had already made her decision about what her role would be in humanity's future. I can't, she said. I have something else I need to do. 3 months later, Sarah stood in the docking bay of a new ship. It wasn't built with human technology alone, but with a combination of human engineering and architect knowledge. The result was something unprecedented, a vessel capable of traveling between galaxies. Captain Rodriguez had volunteered to command the ship, and much of Sarah's original research team had joined the mission, but they weren't the only ones aboard. The ship carried representatives from every major human culture and philosophy. Scientists, artists, philosophers, historians, and ordinary people who wanted to be part of something larger than themselves. Are you sure about this? Rodriguez asked as they prepared for departure. Sarah looked out at the stars through the docking bay windows. The architect told me that its people had spread across the galaxy for 30,000 years, exploring and learning. It's time for humanity to do the same. But we're going beyond the galaxy, Marcus pointed out. We're going to Andromeda. We have no idea what we'll find there. Sarah smiled. Maybe we'll find other species that survived what our ancestors did. Maybe we'll find new civilizations that we can meet as friends instead of conquerors. Or maybe we'll find empty worlds where we can build the kind of galactic community the architects dreamed of. The ship's engines hummed to life, powered by architect technology but operated by human hands. As they pulled away from Earth, Sarah thought about the choice humanity was still making. Back on Earth, the debate continued. Some people embraced the alien knowledge and used it to build a better world. Others rejected it out of fear. Still others tried to exploit it for personal gain, but that was how it should be, Sarah realized. The choice couldn't be made by governments or councils or even individuals like herself. It had to be made by humanity as a whole, one person at a time, one decision at a time. Dr. Chen, came a voice over the ship's communication system. We're receiving a transmission from the archive. Sarah hurried to the bridge. On the main screen, the familiar figure of the architect appeared. My friends, it said, and Sarah was surprised to hear warmth in its voice. I wanted to wish you well on your journey. You have chosen to explore rather than exploit, to seek friends rather than subjects. You have proven that my faith in your species was justified. The architect paused, and when it continued, there was something different in its tone. Hope. I have watched your people these past months. Not all have chosen wisely, but enough have chosen well. The memorial you are building honors not just the memory of the dead, but the possibility of the living. The explorers who now travel to distant galaxies carry with them the dreams we thought were lost forever. The image of the architect began to fade. My vigil is ending. For 50,000 years I have guarded the past. Now it is time for you to build the future. Wait, Sarah called out. But the transmission was already ending. The screen went dark and then lit up again with a new image. It showed the archive, but now it was changing. The ancient structure was transforming, its dark metal walls becoming transparent crystal. Light poured out from within, carrying with it streams of data. The architect was releasing everything, not just the knowledge it had already shared, but the complete archives of every civilization it had preserved. The history, the art, the music, the poetry, the dreams of 100 extinct species were now flowing out into the galaxy, available to anyone who wished to learn from them. Sarah watched in wonder as the archive became a beacon of light in the darkness of space. After 50,000 years of silence, the voices of the dead were speaking again. "Captain," she said quietly, "set course for Andromeda. We have work to do." As their ship accelerated beyond the speed of light, Sarah thought about the conversation she had had with the architect so many months ago. It had asked her what she would do with her sorrow about humanity's past. Now she knew the answer. She would use that sorrow to build something better. She would help humanity become the species they had the potential to be. Behind them, Earth grew smaller until it was just another star in the darkness. Ahead of them lay the unknown, full of possibilities both wonderful and terrible. But for the first time in 50,000 years, humanity was reaching for the stars not as conquerors, but as explorers. Not as destroyers, but as builders. Not as the species that had erased every trace of galactic civilization, but as the species that would help rebuild it. The architect had been right about one thing: humanity had evolved. Not completely, not perfectly, but enough. Enough to choose hope over fear, creation over destruction, unity over division. And in the depths of space, in an archive that now blazed with the light of 1,000 suns, the last guardian of the dead finally allowed itself to rest. Its vigil was over. The future belonged to the living. The choice had been made. Humanity would not repeat the mistakes of its ancestors. They would build the galaxy the architects had dreamed of, and in doing so, they would finally redeem the crimes of their past. The stars were waiting. And this time, humanity was ready to meet them as friends. Epilogue, 100 years later. The galaxy was not the same. The memorial orbiting Earth had grown into something magnificent. A living museum that told the stories of not just the extinct civilizations, but of the new ones that had emerged from their ashes. Humans had used architect knowledge to recreate extinct species, not as they had been, but as they might have become if they had lived. The Andromeda expedition had found exactly what Sarah had hoped for: other survivors, other species that had hidden from humanity's ancestors and lived to see their descendants choose a different path. And in the depths of space, where an ancient archive had once stood guard over the memories of the dead, something new had taken its place. An academy where beings from across the galaxy came to learn not just science and technology, but wisdom and compassion. Above the entrance to the academy, carved in letters that could be read by any species in the galaxy, were the final words the architect had spoken before beginning its long rest. The past teaches us what we were. The future shows us what we can become. The choice between them is always ours to make. And every day, beings from 100 different worlds read those words and chose to build rather than destroy, to explore rather than conquer, to love rather than fear. The architect's dream had finally come true. The galaxy was united not by conquest but by hope. And somewhere in the depths of space, in a crystal monument that pulsed with the light of stars, the last guardian of the dead smiled in its eternal sleep, knowing that the choice had been made, the right choice, the end.